Well, welcome everybody to the June 20th meeting of the Alpharetta Development Authority. It looks like we have everyone here except for Morgan and John Goss, so we've got 5 of the 7 here, so we do have a quorum. Just to get started, the Development Authority of Alpharetta is granted the powers and jurisdiction through the State of Georgia General Assembly and a resolution adopted by the Alpharetta City Council on September 3rd, 1996. The function of the authority is to promote the public good and general welfare, trade, commerce, industry, general tax base, and the employment opportunities available in the city of Alpharetta. So first on the agenda is just an approval of the minutes from May 16th. Did anyone have any comments on those? No comments? Any motions?
Make a motion to approve.
Those in favor? That's 5 for 5 to approve the minutes. Next on our agenda is the intergovernmental agreement between the City of Alpharetta and the Development Authority for Tech Alpharetta, the funding. So Lance, do you want to give us a brief update before Kathy comes up?
Happy to, Mr. Chairman. Before you all tonight, as the chairman mentioned, is the intergovernmental agreement between the city and the Development Authority for the partial funding of $95,000 for Tech Alpharetta. If you approve this item, the second item on tonight's new business agenda is a memorandum of understanding with Tech Alpharetta to execute the funds that the city is dispersing through the IGA. And this was approved, the IGA was, by City Council in their May meeting of last month. But before we get to the agenda item to vote on, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Karen Cashin, Tech Alpharetta CEO.
Good afternoon, Development Authority. It's great to see you all. There we go. So I am here to update you all on the continued growth of Tech Alpharetta. Boy, this thing works well now. And here also to request your approval to execute the intergovernmental agreement with the City of Alpharetta. It goes without saying that we absolutely appreciate all the support that you all and the city have provided to Tech Alpharetta over the years, without which we couldn't have grown Tech Alpharetta into the robust tech economic development engine that it is today for the city. And I'm pleased to report that we continue to be on track for another very successful year, both from an economic and fiscal standpoint, as well as from a branding and name recognition standpoint in the innovation ecosystem. So we have some slides that wanted to share with you all briefly, and thank you all for putting me up first on the agenda. We do have our last big event of the first half of the year tonight. Apparently 122 people are due at 6 o'clock, so I suppose I should be there. But you know, as I'd covered back in our January presentation to council and then to you all, we grew our programs and our brand to new levels in 2022 and are full speed ahead in that regard. 2023 got off to a good, strong start as we saw a lot of additional numbers of startup founders joining our center. It was really the first significant boost we'd seen in membership since prior to COVID. And it's feeling a lot more at our innovation center like it did pre-COVID with large quantities of startups and their teams in there on a daily basis, as well as the programs. So that's been very exciting and heartening to see, and also bodes well for future company and jobs development for the city. We are back up at 52 startup company levels today. You know, as I mentioned, we're truly, as you know, a tech economic development engine for the city, growing the new companies and new jobs through our incubator, helping to attract and retain new companies to the city, and working to attract, retain, and grow the skilled tech workforce, as well as branding Alpharetta as a tech hub. Just by way of review, last year we had 3 new startup graduates. This year we fully expect to hit 2. One is about to graduate out of the center, VAC Mobile. The second one, Terzo, keeps extending its month-to-month sublease while it negotiates with its landlord over in, I believe, Sanctuary Parkway on the Alpharetta side for a new sublease. So announcements coming shortly on VAC Mobile and then Terzo. But you know, we've graduated 20 companies from the incubator since we opened our doors in 2015. We've created 1,188 new tech and service industry jobs for the city of Alpharetta since our inception, and a total of 1,854 new tech jobs for the state of Georgia. The numbers are constantly growing. Terzo alone is, you know, spilling out of our largest office and into the lounge areas of our building right now because of its rapid rate of hiring since it raised $16 million in a Series A round last December. So it's creating new jobs on a, you know, bi-weekly to monthly basis, which is really exciting to see. So the numbers don't remain fluid for long, and we look forward to at the end of 2023 to doing an updated count of the number of new jobs created as a result of Tech Alpharetta's graduate startups. There's a slide in here that just shows the 6 startup graduates that are actively hiring, really consistently actively hiring. They have been since late last year with no let-up in sight. So Data Sears, Boost Mobile, Oval Edge, Microgrid, Sol Microgrid, Variable, and Voxy all continue to hire new employees. Fundraising success. As of the end of last year, our startups had raised more than $221 million in investor funding. Investor funding has slowed down for the entire startup ecosystem as a result of the economic conditions, but that doesn't seem to have imposed a hardship on our startups. They're having to wait a little longer and bootstrap their companies a little bit longer, but you know, the Southeast has never been the easiest market for fundraising for startups, so they're pretty well acclimated to the challenge, and those that can't make it until the fundraising climate changes may fail, but there'll be more new ones behind them. Year to date, we have hosted over 50 events and meetups, both at our incubator, meetups and tech startup workshops, as well as our speaker series events. Tonight's Summer Tech Mixer. We'll be hosting our 3rd annual golf tournament this fall, which is a fundraiser for Tech Alpharetta. So the programs, we keep churning out the programs. And the difference as between now and a few years ago is we've worked very hard to really embed ourselves within the overall Metro Atlanta ecosystem, the innovation ecosystem, so that our events are being promoted not just here for Alpharetta and the North Fulton region, but we now have them on the Startup Atlanta organizational calendar so that our events are promoted all the way throughout Metro Atlanta, the other tech startup incubators, and throughout the city of Atlanta as well, which is attracting a larger and more diversified audience to our programs and helps get the word out about our incubator. In terms of board size, we decided that we had reached critical mass at 49 board members, 36 of whom have been tech company senior level executives. The remainder, the mayor, Lance Morcell for economic development, and a number of our organizational partners. But that being said, we have still remained open to adding additional board members where there's a new company or an enterprise tech company in Alpharetta that becomes interested in joining that we hadn't been able to attract in the past. And in that regard, we recently brought Fiserv onto our board. President of Digital Channels has joined our board, which we're very, very pleased about, as that was the product of a number of years of hard work, and then ultimately, thanks to the city and Lance and economic development, making the introduction and holding a meet and greet over there, we were able to get inside the door over there and persuade them that they needed to be on our board. And in connection with attracting and retaining new tech companies to the city, Our board members and I continue to work in tandem in partnership with the city's economic development team on an as-needed basis. We join this economic development in their meet and greets, the retention visits to area tech companies, economic development has felt, of course, free to call upon our board members or me at any time to assist them in talking or meeting with companies, or to have us host a tour of a prospective company over at the incubator. And then in terms of skilled workforce, skilled tech workforce, we're especially proud, I know I mentioned this a few months ago, of our Tech Alpharetta Women's Forum STEAM Mentoring Program, which has now doubled in size for this fall. We have 25 female executives in STEAM careers from throughout the area who have volunteered to work with 25 high school girls at the Innovation Academy High School, up from 11 last school year, to continue to guide and inspire the high school girls to pursue careers in STEAM where there remains a persistent gender gap. It's been a very, very popular program, both for the girls and the mentors, and I can tell you it was not a heavy lift to attract additional senior-level female executives to volunteer as mentors for this fall. We just mentioned it to our board, and the positions were filled. So we're really excited to see how much the girls are getting out of it, but also how much the mentors are getting out of it. And we feel like there's a very good opportunity to grow this program to a much larger scale. We're also continuing to participate. As I mentioned, we've gotten a lot more involved with the Metro Atlanta innovation ecosystem, not only through their Atlanta Unlocked initiative, but I'm now sitting on the steering committee for the InnovateL initiative, which has been announced and will be fully publicized this fall, but it's actually a series of events throughout the Metro Atlanta, which of course includes Alpharetta, innovation ecosystem, running from September 27th through October 20th this fall, which the biggest anchor event there, of course, is the Venture Atlanta Conference downtown, but our third annual Golf Classic is in there as an anchor event as well, which we're very excited about, hoping to attract an even larger audience and more brand recognition for Tech Alpharetta as a result of that. And also just really heartening to see how the entire ecosystem is now finally starting to collaborate and work together for the good of the overall region. In terms of branding Alpharetta as a tech hub, you knew I was going to that one. We continue to partner with our PR and digital marketing firm, Trevelino Keller, and as a result of that, we're able to build a very large presence, continue to build an even larger presence for Tech Alpharetta, and therefore the city of Alpharetta as a tech hub through social media posts. You can see on the slide 758 social media posts last year, 827 articles mentioned Tech Alpharetta, 6 podcasts, 28 blogs, 4 executive spotlight videos, 4 press releases, and 90 Tech Alpharetta e-newsletters. So, it's constant and ongoing drumbeat of heavy PR and marketing that we're engaging in. And I never turn down a speaking appearance either, because if I can get invited to a speaking appearance, that in my mind is just one more way to build Tech Alpharetta and build the profile of Alpharetta as well. As I mentioned, Fiserv is our new board member as of this year. 100% of our board members are sponsors. Our board companies are all sponsoring Tech Alpharetta at some level, which is up from 0 in 2017 when I stepped into the position. Our board is also 51% female or persons of color, which is very important to us, a priority as an organization. In terms of the financial update, I've handed out separately. Our May financials aren't out yet. They won't be out until the end of this week, but I did hand out budget versus actuals showing January through April 2023, as well as just a snapshot of performance from 2017 through 2022. So very briefly, 2022, our projections overall were $275,000, overall, let's see, EBITDA. We projected 0, actual EBITDA was $65,470. And our revenues, of course, our expenses as well, but our revenues have continued to trend upward consistently since 2017. And this year looks no different. We book most of our sponsorship renewals in the first quarter, so the first quarter revenues tend to look a bit skewed. But you can see that we are on track. Our goal for gross profit is $450,000 for the year. Our expense projection is $450,000 for the year. And we are currently well ahead of projection with, let's see, actual net income of $229,180 to date. So as I mentioned, we're full speed ahead. We want to continue to build this organization and continue to build jobs and new companies for the city of Alpharetta. Try to also build future STEAM workforce for the city and continue to keep our tech companies in the city heavily engaged and involved with the city, with Tech Alpharetta acting as a way for them to do that and get their employees involved as well. And with that, I'd like to invite any questions that you all might have about the slides or the materials.
Karen, you had said that there's, we're one of the 4 cornerstone.
Of the InnovATL initiative.
So how does it compare size-wise, revenue-wise, numbers-wise, their graduates versus us, just to get a feel?
The graduates of other incubators versus us. You know, I don't have the specific data on that, but I can tell you that with the exception of the Atlanta blockchain incubator that opened last year, which is now the smallest of the incubators, we had been the smallest incubator, but with a very loud roar, I would say, for some time. And because of the square footage limits of our size, we can only fit a finite number of startups and therefore only have a finite number of graduates expected out of our space per year compared to, say, in Atlanta Tech Village, where they have, we have 52 tech startups. Currently, they have 350. They've got a high-rise building in Buckhead for that, right? So it's a little bit different from a comparison standpoint, as is, for example, ATDC, which is state-funded, Atlanta Tech Park, which is funded by the City of Peachtree Corners, and the Russell Innovation Center for Entrepreneurs, which is heavily funded from private sector companies to focus on Black founders. And I believe they've received a number of gifts of $10 million or more from from companies in town. So, and they have a very large footprint in terms of building size. So we're still, pretty close to the smallest. But what we're able to produce in terms of graduates and job creation is significant enough to have gained the credibility of all the other organizations in this space in the city, and to grow a very large footprint with a relatively small space. Any other questions?
That's always impressive, so thank you very much.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Well, Lance, do you want to walk us through how this works with the funding coming from the city?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. So in the May meeting, the City Council voted to approve an intergovernmental agreement with the Development Authority. And if it is approved tonight by you all, it would allow for the dispersion of the $95,000 to the Development Authority's financial accounts. That in turn, if the memorandum is executed, would then be executed to Tech Alpharetta in a payment plan system.
Very good, thank you. So with that, would anyone like to make a motion?
I would move that we would approve the intergovernmental agreement to partially fund Tech Alpharetta.
Second.
All those in favor? So that's 5 for 5. So motion is approved.
Thank you.
And with that, we would then move on to the memorandum of understanding. Lance, do you want to tell us what we're approving here?
Absolutely, Mr.
Voting on here.
So the memorandum of understanding is a legal agreement between the Development Authority and Tech Alpharetta as an organization for the execution of the specific funds that were dispersed in the intergovernmental agreement that was just approved by the authority. So if approved, this would allow for the city's finance department to set in motion the payment system that we have in place in prior years, starting with the new fiscal year on July 1.
So with that, we'd be looking for a motion to approve the execution of the memorandum of understanding.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
I move we approve the memorandum of understanding with Tech Alpharetta.
Second.
All those in favor? So 5 for 5, so Karen, you're good, and you can go enjoy yourself. All right.
Well, thank you all for your support, and hope you all saw the email, but you are all welcome and invited after this meeting to our summer tech mixer right up the street at City Eats Kitchen in Alpharetta.
Thank you very much,
Thank you all.
and thanks for all the good work that you do.
Absolutely.
Well, that's takes care of 2 of our 3 items of new business. The third item is Project Green, and Lance will give us a brief update or brief synopsis of Project Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board, before you is an initial bond inducement resolution for Project Green. This is a major economic development investment project that our team has been working with the Georgia Department of Economic Development and as well as some of our regional partners on as well. In short, this would be, phase 1 alone would be a 1,000 job investment into the Alpharetta community with a planned, at a later date, phase 2 that would include an additional 1,000 jobs as well as an increased capital investment. And with that, I would turn it over to our bond attorney, Mr. Woody Vaughn, to go into some of the details of the inducement resolution itself.
Thank you, Lance. Mr. Chairman, members of the Development Authority. Yeah, this is a bond inducement resolution for Project Green. As Lance mentioned, it's a 2-phase project. The immediate phase will create 1,000 jobs very quickly in Alpharetta and have an investment of approximately $35 million in personal property and building improvements. The second phase, which would come down the road, probably 5-6 years from now, would be a new building, an investment of approximately $121 million. Obviously, costs 5 years from now, we'll have to figure out, what that is. But today, the estimate is $121 million and an additional 1,000 jobs. Both phases, the average annual salary is in excess of $105,000 a year from the company's records. So they're consultants who we've been working on this. A lot of people have been working on this over the last week. Thank you all for your input and some of the language. There have been changes to the resolution, the initial draft that you received last Friday. I can walk you through those. I sent a new draft with a marked copy earlier today, so just let me know. Otherwise, the wrinkles in this is just that this project has not been announced. It is still confidential. That is why the inducement resolution does not have a company name in it, and the inducement letter that will go out in the future also does not have a company name or a location in it. We think that announcement for phase 1 will occur in the upcoming weeks. At that point, assuming the bond inducement resolution is passed, the letter will be revised just to put in the company's name, and the letter would go out to the company. And you all would be made aware of that formally before that occurs. So I'm here to answer any additional questions you have, walk you through the changes from Friday if you would like to know those, whatever the pleasure of the board is at this time.
I did have one question. The $35 million in phase 1, is that all up front or is that over time?
It will be done in the near future. They will occupy the new space, which is existing. They'll immediately start their building improvements. I do not have a timeline for the real property improvements, how long that will take, and approximately $9 million will be of their personal property and equipment that will go into the building that won't become a fixture to the building, but will actually be personal property which they would have a personal property tax return on. Do you have any additional on the timeline?
Nothing specifically,
Yeah.
Mr.
But
Vaughn.
once it's announced, we will have all of that type of information before we come back for a final bond resolution. More detail on the fixtures and tenant improvements versus personal property.
There was a lot of meat to this.
Yeah, there was.
And the, just, if I can just share my thoughts on this, it's an existing, we have an existing incentive on the property. So this is essentially restarting the clock on this property. A portion of the building is, the leases are up, and it would be becoming vacant. Not 100% vacant, but would become vacant. My thought process was that, it's, what this is doing is it's ensuring that this building would remain occupied, would retain its value, would essentially ensure that we've got something there for 10 years. And where we are right now, I've looked a little bit at the values, and the existing value is just around $20 million on the property, and this is a $35 million investment. From what we've done in other scenarios with the bonds, this is very comparable, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we are not at risk for this. The company, raises the funds, places the bonds, is it's not us that are on the hook. It's not taxpayer dollars that are going out in this case. We as the development authority are the vehicle for allowing them to issue these bonds. And we are the vehicle that would allow them, if this goes forward, to have a tax abatement that would reset at this point. So that's been my understanding. Correct me if I misstated anything.
Yeah, the location will be all nailed down and will be provided before the next meeting. You'll have all that information. But yeah, the creation of 1,000 new jobs very quickly is a pretty good economic development win for the city, for sure. And that's a big deal.
Do we know anything about where the potential jobs are coming on phase 2? When I say where, from my understanding, this is a potential relocation of jobs within the state for phase 1. But phase 2, are these newly created, or would they be moving from elsewhere?
Yeah, I think what we'll have is the next meeting. It will have been announced, and we'll have a representative from the company who will be able to answer all those questions. And if we can get that in between the meeting, we can get it to you earlier. But I'd rather wait for the company to give you that than have me kind of pontificate on it.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, to follow up on Mr. Vaughn's point, the state of Georgia's Economic Development Department, which is working in coordination with the governor's office, has, they've been a bit hesitant to give us the full details in regards where the jobs are coming from specifically to their full amount. And that's simply because they don't want to get ahead of the skis with the governor's office. But we fully trust our economic development partners to have vetted both the company itself and its financial standing, as well as the quality of the jobs and their addition to the city's economy as well as the state's.
Greg, did you have anything you'd like to add? So with that, what we are doing today would be voting on whether or not to pursue this, that we would be willing to move forward with being that vehicle to allow the bonds to be issued, to be that vehicle to allow a restart of an abatement in return for a company moving 1,000 jobs, good-paying jobs, average of $109,000 jobs, to come to Alpharetta. So that's what we are looking for right now.
That's absolutely correct, and it's just the initial step. We have to come back for a formal bond resolution once all the legal agreements are in place. It's been announced. So this is just the initial step, but it's critical because it gives companies, when you do the inducement resolution, it gives the companies, that it sends them a message that there's political support for the economic incentives that we'll come back for to formally get approved with the bond resolution.
So with that, any questions, comments, or motions?
And so there will be a motion to approve the adoption of the inducement resolution.
I make a motion to approve the adoption of the initial revenue bond inducement for Project Green.
So those in favor? So you've got 5 for 5.
Thank you all. Also, I just wanted to let you all know that Kate Haygood is here from Alston and Bird, and Alston and Bird is representing the company on this transaction, so I did want to recognize her. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. And we look forward to working with you. So with that, we've concluded our new business, but Lance will be giving us an update on from the City of Alpharetta's Economic Development staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I'd like to give a brief update on some ongoing projects and initiatives that our division has been working on since the last time we have met. Just a couple weeks ago, Director Cook and myself attended at the invitation of our state and regional partners the Bio International National Convention in Boston, Massachusetts. So that is kind of the North American premier conference for the life science industry, which is one of the fastest growing economic sectors in the state of Georgia. So we were there with a consortium of other municipalities and counties across the state, as well as members of the Georgia Department of Economic Development. We were there for about 3 days, worked a booth a bit, and also worked the exhibitors floor, met with a lot of great companies, several of them interested in coming to Georgia long term. It's always great to make those connections. We also helped host a reception in Boston one of those evenings that brought a very impressive guest list of life science companies and companies related to that industry. And we were able to meet with several of those as well that have actually turned into some meetings that we have planned in the coming weeks to follow up some of the connections we made there. So we felt like it was a very worthy conference that we got a lot out of, and always appreciative to our state and regional partners for thinking of Alpharetta and including us in these types of delegations, and hope that that continues to be the case. I know that Charlotte on my team has been working hard with the Alpha Loop Foundation, which I know this board is aware of, and several members of the board are also serving on as well. That is moving along quite nicely. Website is being created, and marketing materials, things of that nature. So very excited to see that progress there. I think we all know and have seen the success of the Atlanta Beltline Foundation and what that has done for the Beltline. And of course, having an organization focused on the Alpha Loop and its success in marketing can only benefit the great trail investment that is not only a recreational investment, it is also an economic investment as well, as I think this board all knows. And I do want to say that it is our plan to do an economic development focused tour with you all. I know we had one on the books a few months ago that we had to cancel for some quorum-related issues, but it is on Charlotte and I's radar. It is something we certainly want to do with you all, and we'll be working with the chairman to finalize that, get a good route going, things of that nature. That's just kind of some generalizable few things we've been working on in the last few weeks, in addition to some of the items you saw before you tonight. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have for staff.
Just with your Boston tour and, with the Life Science Conference, was there anything that you saw other cities doing or development authorities doing that, we don't currently offer as a city and that we don't offer as a development authority that we should start looking?
That's a great question, Mr. Chairman. I would say, and I really truly believe this, that this board really is innovative, and I know has entertained things in the past, including the trail grant. That is something that probably could have been on tonight's agenda, but given some of the extent of what we were facing tonight, both with Tech Alpharetta's funding and also bond inducement, we felt that it might be best for a date later this summer. But things like that creativity, I think, already sets this board apart. It's not to say that the board, just like any individual, can't grow, can't learn, can't improve. But I would say that this board is already ahead of many of its peers in terms of entertaining things that are not only a great asset for the city, but are also different and more nuanced than a standard development authority might contend with. And I think, as we all know, coming out of COVID, that evolution of how economic development has changed in the shape of the pandemic, from office vacancies and things like that, that this board is already seeing some of those changes and willing to tackle some of those issues. In terms of things specifically that I saw in Boston that the board can entertain, not specifically. I'm sure we could work with the board if it was their wish to kind of craft some more specific incentives on specific industries, whether it be, bond inducements on, say, life science companies or something like that. But I didn't see that specifically while I was in Boston. But, I think the creative juices of this board are quite impressive. So that would be my answer to that.
And then what about, do we have any updates on the long-term economic development plan or the TAP panel?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So the economic development strategic plan that I think that you're referencing, we recently had a call with the consultant. There's just been a lot of scheduling both on our side and on his side. We do have a final draft deliverable that staff is going through now. And I did actually reach out to Kyle, the consultant, this morning to get a date on the calendar in the coming weeks to do a virtual call with the stakeholder group that I know several members of this board have been a part of. So do stay tuned for that. I do expect that initial next step to be taken, hopefully scheduled by the end of the week for within the next couple weeks. And at that time, once he has given feedback from that steering committee group, any modifications that are requested by the group and by staff will be modified to the document, and then we'd be looking at council agendas probably later this summer to place it on with hope of approval by city council, much like a comprehensive plan might be approved by city council. So it would work in that similar nature of asking for adaptation by city council. But this step with the steering committee and the feedback from the steering committee and staff would come first. And then with respect to the TAP, that I know this authority funded, which we're quite grateful for on the staff level. They did a preliminary walkthrough with their steering committee when they did their 2-day sit-down. I guess that was April or May. It was a couple months ago. They're working on a final deliverable, and once that is made available, we'll make sure that the board is able to see that and go through it, because you were the funding mechanism for that, and we really were proud of what we saw in that initial walkthrough, and we really felt like it was a great creative group that had a lot of good ideas for the Windward Corridor specifically.
Just to add on to that, the technical assistance panel has indicated that they will give us a report by the end of June, so we do expect it later this month. I haven't heard any updates changing that timeline. They received their first payment as per the contract once that was authorized, so they've received half of that initial They've received 10,000 of the 20,000, and then they'll receive the other 10,000 upon receipt of that report. But we do expect it later this month, hopefully.
Very good. Well, with that, any other thoughts, questions, comments before we adjourn? All right, well, with that, we're adjourned.